Hey, what's going on everybody? Commander Crane here, and we are back with another Pioneer deck tech. And today, we're going to be talking about Wurm Ramp. I'm very excited to share this very spicy list with you. As always, at the end of the video, let me know in the comment section below, what do you think about the deck? Was there a specific Wurm I forgot to include in this deck? Or do you have suggestions for upcoming videos? Just let me know in the comment section. So Wurms. Wurms has been one of my favorite creature types in Magic for quite some time. When I was kind of a newer Magic player, I played a whole bunch of cool random Wurms like Elder Scale Wurm and like Yavimaya Wurm when I first started playing. And there's a specific card in this deck that was kind of the inspiration for this list. Obviously, the thumbnail there is Pelakka Wurm, and of course we were playing some number of Pelakka Wurms. But the main thing is the card that I was thinking of, which is a somewhat recent addition to Magic, is what inspired me to build this deck. So real quick before we hop into the meat of the deck here, we gotta obviously look at the ramp, because we're, a rare ramp deck. What are we actually playing to be able to ramp into these Wurms? Obviously we're playing Llanowar Elves, Elvish Mystic, and Sylvan Caryatid. So Sylvan Caryatid is actually important in this deck. I'm not playing a card like Glimpse the Core or even like Cultivate. I thought about playing Wolfwillow Haven, but ultimately decided to play Sylvan Caryatid. I think both would be solid options, but I ultimately chose the Caryatid, and it's important because we want more permanence for one of our specific Wurms that we're going to be playing. So anyways, this is the main ramp package. Let's go and hop into the creatures that actually matter in this. The one creature we got to talk about that's not a Wurm, though, that we're playing is Topiary Stomper. It's just really, really good. That's why we're playing 4 copies of it. Helps us ramp. Also good with another card that's on the next page. But anyways, let's go and start talking about the Wurm. So Colossal Rattleworm is just a really, really good card. 6/5 for 4 trample, potentially as flash, which we are playing some deserts. And it's a really good ability when it goes into the graveyard. It's really good. But the main inspiration behind this deck is Roaming Throne. Roaming Throne is a sweet card. There's a reason why it's so pricey. It's because, Commander players love it, and it's just a really, really good card. Okay, so when it enters, we choose a creature type, and Roaming Throne is the chosen type in addition to its other types. And then if a triggered ability of another creature you control of the chosen type triggers, it triggers an additional time. So all the Wurms that we're playing on the next slide are triggered by Roaming Throne. And man, I tell you what, Roaming Throne is perfect in this deck. I don't know what it is. Like when Lost Caverns of Ixalan was when it wasn't a crazy new set, I did I think 1 or 2 Roaming Throne decks, but I really didn't do a lot of them. And this really is huge for Wurms, and you'll see why on the next slide here, which let's go and hop into the meat of it. These are the Wurms that I'm really excited to play in this deck. So we're playing 4 copies of Defiler Vigor, 4 copies of Armada Wurm, and 4 copies of Pelakka Wurm. So Defiler Vigor is, I would say, the best of the Defiler cycle, which, to be honest with you, not a lot of them were good, but Defiler is fantastic and also still in Standard for those who do play Standard. So, has Trample, 6/6 for 5. As an additional cost to cast green permanent spells, you can pay 2 life, and those spells cost 1 green less to cast if you paid life this way, which is really, really good. And then whenever you cast a green permanent spell, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. It's a permanent. That's why we're not playing like Cultivate or Glimpse the Core. We want the creatures because they're permanents, which help us cast the Defiler of Vigor. Very, very important for that. And then obviously Roaming Throne helps trigger that. When we cast Roaming Throne after Defiler, obviously it doesn't trigger the Defiler, but it is the only card in the entire list that does not do so. We're also playing Armada Wurm, the only non-fully green card in the entire deck, but obviously it's not going to matter. We got the Sylvan Caryatids and we have some white lands that we can play in just for the easy splash. And then when it enters the battlefield, make a 5/5 Trampling Wurm, so you get 2 5/5 Trampling Wurms for 6 mana. I mean, that's a pretty solid rate. I've always liked Armada Wurm. It's one of my favorite cards in Magic, and I'm very excited to feature it in a deck list finally here on the channel. And the last card is Pelakka Wurm, a fantastic card in Draft. And guess what? We're also playing it in our Pioneer deck. All right, 7/7 for 7 trample. When it enters, you gain 7. When it dies, draw a card. Very simple. When it, I mean, it's fantastic. We can gain 14 and draw 2 if we have a Roaming Throne, which is pretty cool. So definitely a huge fan of Pelakka Wurm. I just really like it. I've always wanted to cast it in Pioneer. I played it in Standard a little bit when it was legal at M19. It was always funny when the aggro decks, they're trying to finish you off, and then all of a sudden you're like, Pelakka Wurm, gain 7. It's like, oh, great. And even if I kill it, they get to draw a card. Gross. So definitely a huge fan of Pelakka Wurm. And that's the entire main board, except for the lands, which we'll go and hop into that now. So it's a pretty simple mana base for the most part. So we're playing 4 Temple Guard and 4 Branch Loft Pathways, our main dual lands. We're not playing any of the fast lands just because we're a ramp deck. We want to make sure that our lands come in untapped so we can hit that 6th and 7th mana source that we need. We're playing the one, I'm sorry if I mispronounce this, the Creosote Heath, just because of Palaka Wurm. It's just a one of, obviously, like, the one damage is not, it's not nothing, but we're really just playing it as a one of to fetch with Colossal Rattlewurm. And then the rest of the lands, we're playing 1 Cavern of Souls, 4 Haship Oasis, and 4 Scavenger Grounds. That makes up 9 deserts that we're playing for Colossal Rattlewurm. I thought about playing one of the white ones, but again, the only white card in the main board is the Armada Wurm, so I wanted to play the monocolor ones. With Scavenger Grounds, it was tricky. I thought about playing a couple different deserts, but ultimately decided to play Scavenger Grounds just because it's a really good main board answer for the entire metagame as a whole right now. It's really good against Phoenix, you know. There's other decks that are good, you know, like, what is it, like Greasefang is pretty good, you know, getting rid of their graveyards. I don't know. I just thought it was solid overall, so that's why I played the Scavenger Grounds. 1 Cavern of Souls is pretty self-explanatory. And then rounding out our lands, we are playing 1 Boseiju, 4 Forests, and 1 Plains. Obviously the 1 Plains, again, because we're playing the Topiary Stomper, it's just an easy one of. And as our spicy basic land of the day, I don't know what it is, but this, just with like Palaka Wurm, I really wanted to use a Zendikar full art, and I chose these ones because I feel like these are the most likely lands where you would find worms on Zendikar, because I know like the Palaka Wurm art kind of shows it in like a plainsy type area, kind of like, you know, like a cliff kind of thing. And I don't know, I kind of pictured that plains on there. So those are the spicy basic lands of the day, and I really do like the original Zendikar lands. So don't go anywhere yet though. We still have to talk about our sideboard as well as some budget options for the deck. So sideboarding is really simple. Graveyard Hate. We are technically a white splash deck, so I definitely would recommend playing Rest in Peace. You could also play Scavenging Ooze, which is already really good because we already include Scavenging Ooze on the Graveyard Hate, but I would probably play both. You're definitely going to want some Get Losts just because, you know, we're not playing any removal in the main board, but depending on what the matchup looks like post-board, we're going to want some, so I definitely recommend playing some number of Get Lost. We're going to want some Vampire Hate. Our creatures are the same size, if not bigger than vampires, but unfortunately their Vein Rippers like to come in on turn 3, so we need to be ready to handle those. I would recommend some number of Pithing Needles and Pick Your Poison are both fantastic. And then Scavenging Ooze, as I talked about earlier, it's good sort of graveyards. It's really good against the aggro decks. It's good against mid-range, pretty good against control. It's just a really good card. Huge fan of Scavenging Ooze in this deck. And then the last thing we have to talk about is the budget options, which is really simple. Play more basic lands. You know, you could take out the Cavern of Souls, take out the the Boseiju, and just play a couple more basics. The other thing is Roaming Throne is relatively pricey. It obviously hasn't gotten a reprint just because, you know, it was just printed into standard with Lost Caverns of Ixalan. The card is pretty pricey. I'm not going to lie to you. They go for about 27 US a piece. If you want to go ahead and substitute that with a different good rampy 4-drop, nothing wrong with that. If you really just want to play more ramp, you could even play like the new one that's like search for 2 basic lands or deserts, you know, just so that way you can hit your other you know, creatures a little bit better. It's really up to you for the most part, but Roaming Throne is definitely very, very good in this deck. Last thing we have to talk about is the current price of the list. So $303 for the current list, which is a decent amount for a Pioneer deck. I would say that's slightly above average in terms of what we do here on the channel, but that's mostly just because of the Roaming Throne. You cut the Roaming Thrones out, this deck is $200, like pretty much right on the dot if you just take those out. And with the budget list, I was able to get it to $58 US, and all he really did was cut the Roaming Thrones, and then I also cut the Temple Gardens and the Boseiju. I cut just those couple of cards, and we got it down that cheap. Because most of the cards are cheap in this deck. The ramp package is mostly commons. The Sylvan Caryatids I did swap out with Wolf Willowhaven. And then all the worms are incredibly cheap. I think Defiler's the priciest at like $250, which is super cheap. So if you like worms as much as I do, or if you just like ramping in Pioneer, this would definitely be a perfect deck for you for like F&M or something like that. And definitely let me know in the comment section below if you end up building this deck or what your favorite worm is in Pioneer. Just let me know in the comment section. So that takes us to the end of the video here. Thanks so much for watching. The deck lists are in the description below if you'd like to check them out for yourself. Huge shout out to our channel members, Ralph, Matt, Arcadius, Ray, Gary, and Sarwanoki. If you are interested in being a channel member, it's only $1 US a month. You get access to the exclusive Discord as well as other features here on the channel. So I'm Commander Crane. Thanks for watching this video, and I hope to catch you in the next one.